What is up, world, and welcome to the What You Got podcast, where we talk topics A to Z and everything in between. This week, we're discussing the latest entry in the filmography of the wildly whimsical director Wes Anderson, and that is The French Dispatch. Before we get started, in case you haven't seen this film, spoiler alert, there will be some details shared during the course of this episode that might ruin the movie for you. So if you haven't seen it quite yet, make sure that you stop this, hop on back, and listen to another episode, and then you can come back through once you've seen the film. So, Bud, this was an interesting addition, and I heard about it because of you, obviously, months ago, and I hadn't done a whole lot of research. I thought it was about post-World War II France, and I learned that it's kind of right, but not really-ish. I'm going to kick it off to you. Lot to talk about here. What you got?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I kind of knew it was a little bit going in because I watched the trailer. But yeah, I guess it takes place. I don't actually know what time period it takes place in. I want to say it's like the 70s because I think Bill Murray's character is like at the end of his life or something. At least that's how it kind of portrays it in the movie, and it says that he dies in like 1975 or something. So, yeah, I mean, it was kind of. I mean, I knew that it had like a bunch of like these short stories in the movie, but like I don't know, A French Dispatch to me, like I liked it. I like Wes Anderson. I'm just gonna start off by saying I do like Wes Anderson a lot, and he's got a really like quirky film style as well, and it's just the movie though, The French Dispatch, I found it like, I don't know, it's hard to explain what it's about. Do you feel like that's kind of the case? Like
I literally watched it. I watched it with my buddy Brian, and he said, "What is it about?" before, and I told it. I thought it was post World War II France. He's like, "Okay, sure." So we watched it. He's like, "I don't know what I just watched." I was like, "Me neither." Oh man,
I know. I mean, I was like trying to follow it all. I was like, there was so much prose, a lot of like very colorful dialogue, and I thought it was really well done. Like in terms of like how all the actors delivered like these really like. You know, I wish I had a quote, but like I can't even think of one because it's just it's very dense with like this very colorful language. Especially like something that really stands out to me is when we're Jeffrey Wright's story, you know how he described the dinner. I thought it was so beautifully well done, but it was just so loaded with like very like vivid imagery of like. It really put like it was literally written. It was like reading a written article out loud. You know, that's kind of the premise of the story. There's a lot of narration because I mean, if you don't understand, to put it as simply as possible, The French Dispatch is like a couple of stories that were written in like this newspaper from Kansas, I want to say.
Yes,
and
dude, I had
or magazine. Sorry,
about that.
And it was called The French Dispatch, and it was like they had like an office in France, so that's why. And then there was just like 3 or 4 stories surrounding a couple of like their writers during like this publication. So, so like they're narrating their stories out loud in a sense, and you're seeing it visually kind of take place, like the process of the story kind of going from point A to point B. And there's a lot of narration. It's very colorful, like colorful, not like foul language, colorful as in very like vivid and. Vivid imagery, very descriptive, a lot of metaphors, similes to describe kind of.
They do have.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. I was gonna say they do have some unexpected but well-timed swearing. I always find that Wes Anderson.
Wes Anderson does, and like
cracked me up.
It did crack me up, and he is funny. Like he's got like good comedic timing. A lot of really interesting sequences in the movie. I do want to ask you your question though. Like, well, what are your thoughts on The French Dispatch? Like, lay them on me.
So, like I said, I had literally no idea what I was watching initially. And so as the story unfolds, and in traditional, I guess, Wes Anderson style, it's a story kind of within another story, and there's some weird lateral movements around there. So I was just trying to wrap my head around what I was watching initially. And so it probably took the first 20 minutes for me to understand. And they had mentioned so many reporters, and they were going through the stories, and I was just wondering, will there be a million of these, or will it just be a number? So through his But the crazy thing, and I gave it to Wes Anderson, this is when I knew the movie was doing something. First off, I had to go to the bathroom at like halfway through. But I said, no, I'm riding this out. But I also didn't know how long it was supposed to be. And then and I said, you know what? I have to be strong because I want to know. I want to just keep going into more stories. And it ended. And I said, man, I kind of wish there was more to it too. So I think that meant that it was successfully done. So I enjoyed it. It was funny. It had its hearty moments in which you really started doing some thinking, and we can talk a little bit about that because I thought that happened particularly during the Jeffrey Wright kind of tale. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, everybody came to play in terms of the actors. Yeah. So hats off to Wes Anderson. It's a quirky one, but you've done it again.
It really was like impressive. The movie's not even that long, and he was able to condense like a lot of like different stories, and it was really like quickly paced. Like it kind of just moved from one story to the next, and like the individual like stories within the story were well paced. Didn't feel like it was rushed. It felt like there was like ample time given to each and every character. Everyone kind of felt developed, and at the same time, like. You also got like an overarching story about like, for example, a Timothée Chalamet plot. Like, you know, it was like kind of like a revolution, which I was really trying to figure out what exactly for. It's just like was a little confused about that. It seemed like they just wanted like the men wanted to go into the women's dormitory, and then like for some reason there was like gunshots and like the army rolling in. I was like, is there something else here? Like what else is like this manifesto? Is this like kind of like was that like supposed to be a metaphor for like more like social change or something, like a revolution? Like I don't know, like there's just a lot of thoughts in the head.
Yeah, no,
I'm curious though, like so Wes Anderson is known for doing a lot of like different things with colors. He's got a really popped out like color scheme. I am curious though, like he uses a lot of black and white here, and he like changes from like one scene to the next. Like, do you have any thoughts on that?
So it was an interesting approach. So if you use, I guess, the Grand Budapest Hotel, which was Isle of Dogs was his last movie, and then before that was, I guess, Grand Budapest Hotel. But talk about colors, it was a lot of purples, and there was kind of like some pink, orange, like reddish action going on. So this was so interesting, and I think that with this one. Wes Anderson, he didn't step away from that necessarily, but he got more into I don't even know if this is the right term, but theoretical filmmaking. So that was obviously a component of it, but I don't think it was as much of a character in this film as it has been in some of his past ones. He was really just figuring out how to structure this so that it's a coherent kind of just sequence of events and everything fits together. And I think he did his thing.
Yeah. I mean, he definitely that's true. Although I was curious though, like I noticed that in certain stories though, like for like one scene would be in color, right? And then it would like same scene but a different angle, and it's black and white. Like,
are you thinking about the Concrete Masterpiece arc, where sometimes in the prison it's black and white, and then sometimes it's color?
Mm-hmm. But I would say that it even happened with all the stories, didn't it? It happened maybe less so with Timothée Chalamet. I feel like that was mostly in black and white with a couple of scenes in color. Mm-hmm. Actually, there definitely are. I think it's throughout the entire movie that
now that you mention that,
back and forth between black and white and color. And I was like racking my head through the entire time. I was like, why is he doing that?
Dude, okay, I don't know if this is right, but the black and white might be what was actually published, the literal black and white. Mm-hmm. But the other colorful moments are the ones that are just part of the experience that might not necessarily have been recorded by the reporters.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. That's a good observation there, Palmer.
Thank you.
My thought when I was watching the movie was that because he made with Owen Wilson's opening like really quick story,
the cycling reporter. Yeah.
He showed a lot of like differences between the new and the old, and then the old was always in black and white except for like one frame where it wasn't, and the new was always in color. So like when I was watching the movie, for some reason that stayed with me, and I like connected that the black and white was always showing like maybe the theme or the characters on the screen kind of represented an older regime, and the color represented the color scene represented a newer regime. But I couldn't find that to be consistent throughout the movie, but it was just a thought I had.
Interesting. I like that though, because I didn't even have that observation during that sequence of the
Yeah,
film.
because there was an instance where Adrian Brody's character is like presenting like Benicio del Toro. I can't even remember all these characters' names.
There were a lot.
There were
It's okay.
so many characters. Benicio del Toro's like piece, and that shot starts out in color, but the moment it shoots over to kind of, and he's like trying to sell it as like, this is modern art, this is the new wave of art, like we're tired of all the old stuff. And the moment that it like shoots over to like his uncles, I think,
Okay, yeah.
it's black and white. And like they're supposed to kind of represent the old guard, and he has to convince them that this is like the new wave of art and to buy into this project that he wants to get into. So that's kind of where my like original hypothesis came in, but I don't think I would have to like literally scrutinize the movie to like see if that would carry out, but I kind of remember certain scenes not being the case, but I just wanted to call that out to see if you had any thoughts. Go ahead. Sorry,
I'm
just
getting a little slow on me. Ooh, welcome back.
Yeah, all right. Just some technical difficulties, everybody. We're sorry about that, but
happens to the best of us.
Happens to the best of us. What was I saying? Where did I leave off in my little rant thought that I had about the...
No, rant. You're talking about colors, and then you talked about Adrian Brody's uncles as they were getting into modern art, and how when the camera was on them, they were in black and white, and you thought that was kind of a reflection of the old guard.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So to finish that thought before I think I cut out.
Finish it.
I was saying, there were. That was my original hypothesis when I thought that, because I was noticing it pretty early on that he was just kind of dancing between black and white and color, which I was like, interesting. I wonder why he's doing that. And like, there's got to be a reason in his head, and maybe it is your hypothesis, but I would have to like go through the movie again to see if like that's true, because I kind of remember notable examples that wasn't necessarily the case, and maybe your theory is the correct one. But I don't know if these stories are true or if they're based on another thing.
Yeah. And so speaking of the stories, do you want to go story by story with just our overarching thoughts and ask any questions? Perfect. All right, so I'm not going to lie to you. Is it all right if we skip the cycling reporter? I mean, shouts out to Owen Wilson. Hello, and thank you for the cameo. Yeah. But I think this film really starts kicking off with a concrete masterpiece, and as you mentioned before, with Benicio del Toro. And Henry Winkler makes an appearance as well. So
there are so many people in this movie. I'm pretty sure even Christoph Waltz has a quick cameo in this movie. Doesn't have a line, but is very, very much... I don't know how Wes Anderson attracts so many like massive actors, but... there's like 50 big names in this movie, I think, alone.
Yup.
It's just wild.
Definitely.
It's wild. And like they even have small parts, like Ed Norton is in it for very shortly, Saoirse Ronan, Christoph Waltz, William Dafoe, like...
Who is he?
He's the guy in the chicken
in the
coop.
prison cell.
Yeah.
Yes, I forgot about that, dude.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And then there's just like people that I recognize that were all in The Office, like at Bill Murray's place. I'm like, I know that like one of those actresses is in The Handmaid's Tale. I forget her
Elizabeth
name.
Moss.
Yeah, Elizabeth Moss. Yeah, she's very
famous from Mad Men too. Definitely.
Oh yeah, Mad Men. Yep. And I think that's how I know her. Is Mad Men. And I was thinking like I feel like she's in one other show. She probably is. I just can't remember it. And then, like, you also have Tilda Swinton, and it's just so many people.
Mm-hmm. Yup. So I'm curious there, bud. I'll ask first and foremost, what was your favorite part about the concrete masterpiece? Did you have any particular moments that you were like, man, I see, I understand?
I liked everything about Benicio del Toro's character. What I was a little confused is that because they brought the kid back from Grand Budapest to play like the younger version, and then he becomes Benicio del Toro. And I'm like, that's not how that works. I was like confused a little bit because I'm like, did he like is Benicio del Toro like that guy from like Breaking Bad who like serves people's jail times? But like I clearly it was just supposed to be him grown up, and I was like a little confused about that, but. I just like that guy, that actor, kind of made a cameo in Wes Anderson's movie, but it was funny. I mean, Benicio del Toro's character is just funny. I mean, all about like Wes Anderson's like style, like and how he like created that character, and like how he's just like going through the phases of his early life of like depression, like mental illness, and it's just like the true troubled artist like stereotype. It was pretty funny.
Absolutely. And then I just love the sequence with Adrian Brody and him talking. He's like, I want cigarettes. And then Adrian Brody says, no, I want to give you, legitimate francs and I'll pay for this. And I said, oh, wow, like he's really getting behind him. So I respect that. But I just love the back and forth.
Were great. And I like how he kept like, I loved like the little like romantic relationship that he had with like Léa Seydoux. And it was just the whole like, all these weird like things that he was doing. It was almost kind of like making fun of like modern art in a sense, but at the same time like recognizing some genius in it, because in a way Adrian Brody's kind of promoting that this is what modern art is. And then like you see him like he uses like goat butter or something. Just like, don't get it.
Oh man, no, they did. I mean, he pulled out I think that was probably the most out there when it comes to the stories. And I love the moment when Adrian Brody, first off, for those of you who don't know, so essentially the way this story goes is there's a young artist who has a little run-in with the law. He kills two people, I think beheads them with an axe, and ultimately gets thrown into jail for a lifetime sentence.
Oh, keep going.
Okay, perfect. And so while in jail, he gets older and he needs an outlet. And so he had done art a little bit before, but so he starts really getting into it. And it's led by this female prison guard. And he begins a romantic relationship with her. And he also he paints this one particular illustration that captures the imagination of Adrian Brody. And that's where this all starts, because Adrian Brody is, I guess, an art broker. And so he's trying to buy the rights for that and for a collection as well, because he's trying to warp perceptions and say, essentially, this is modern art. So, Bud, I know you're about to add in something there.
We were just talking about how, like, Benicio del Toro's character's in prison. I love the whole scene when, like, Adrian Brody's trying to, like, get him out of prison. And he's like, so you killed two people. Like, what do you have to say? He's like, it was an accident. It's like, you beheaded them. And then his lawyer like whispers something in his ears like, the first one was an accident, the second one was self-defense.
I forgot about that.
It was so funny.
Oh my gosh.
So that was such a great line. But there was a yeah, I mean it was definitely out there for sure. I mean, it was just like really like, I don't know how to like describe this movie. It's really
I know
hard. I'm finding it trouble to like talk about this movie because it's just so layered in terms of like it compacts a lot of things down like a very short amount of time. There's a lot of like stylistic things, less so in this one. I think the most stylistic one is probably Jeffrey Wright's. There's a lot of very interesting things going on there, but this one definitely still has like Wes Anderson's thing. Like he always has like someone narrating. I love the like the flash to like Tilda Swinton's character kind of talking about it like at a presentation. It was really great, and going through the slides, a lot of funny moments in there. And like it cuts back to like Léa Seydoux's character like doing all these ridiculous poses, like like holding herself above like a steaming hot like radiator, like hanging from I don't even know. Like it's just it's a lot. It's a lot to unpack in this like short story.
Absolutely, and the crazy thing is the drawing or the paintings he does don't even resemble.
I know. I just like I'm like, you can see it there. Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, okay.
I was like, I don't see anything. I just see like a lot of. I see a lot red. I see red there.
Yeah.
I see something that might be a woman. I don't know.
I think it's an eye. Is that an eye?
Is that an eye? Not sure.
Feels like me interpreting modern day art. Yeah. So I was like, okay, it's right in the vein. There you go.
Yeah, I once went to a modern art exhibit, and there was one where some guy literally just wrote down on like a sheet of paper, like just counted 1, 2, 3, and all the way up to like 10,000 or something. And that was on display in MoMA. Or, the Guggenheim. Sorry.
Maybe that should be a podcast episode. What counts as art and what doesn't?
I just feel like I don't understand it. It's gonna be like one of those things one day where I like will take the time to learn about MoMA or modern art, and I'm gonna be like, I get it now. I'm enlightened.
That's beautiful. It's like an old man, and then you just like hobble away.
Yeah, it's like that scene in Parasite where the mom is showing the son Kay, I forget his name, going around the house, and he's like showing him a portrait of her son, and she's like, "Oh, what is this?" And he's like, "It's a self-portrait." And he goes, "Oh, a genius." And it's just like some abstract art. It's like one of those moments.
I gotta watch that movie again too. Goodness gracious.
But going back to this, I loved a lot of like there's a lot of like quirks. Like Wes Anderson's a quirky guy, and this movie, like, he just goes all out, in my opinion, on like being super quirky. The cutaway shots, the repeated name, the ridiculous name of the painting, which is like Simone, like paint like something in cell block D, like it's just like the super long name. A lot of really like quick shots, like when Adrien Brody and Benicio del Toro sitting in the cell, like you just see like it's not for sale, yes it is, it's not for sale, yes it is, and it's just like it's really quick, it's like rapid fire between the two of them, like cutting back and forth, and it's really great. A lot of excellent moments. But what are your thoughts on like the first part of the story? What did you like about it the most?
I like actually the narrative of the main character, Benicio del Toro, because he started out kind of unassuming, and he never really comes across as somebody who's overly violent or anything. I mean, obviously he says some wild stuff, but he just seems kind of almost like a little kid. There's a moment when he's with Leah and they're lying up, and she says, I don't love you, or he's like, wait, how did you know I was going to ask that? And she's just basically reading his mind, and he seems so innocent. And then there's a moment where he strapped himself into the electric chair, and he tells her to like pull it. And I was like, dude, what are you doing? But he's like, I can't keep doing this anymore. I'm done. So it's just, he reminded me almost like a little kid just throwing tantrums. But by the end of it, so as the story swells, him and Adrien Brody kind of come to blows, which was pretty funny to watch that sequence.
Yeah.
But then the other prisoners come in, and they're about to start throwing down on some of these, art aficionados who come to the prison to see this exhibit. And basically Benicio del Toro gets out of prison and out of his lifetime sentence because he defends them and holds people off. So I kind of like that he was an unlikely hero, and I liked that whole little arc.
I really like that scene a lot because like Adrien Brody, like there's like a prisoner coming in to negotiate with Adrien Brody's character, and like he's like, what, prisoners are out there? And he goes out there, and that character was just in there, is like suddenly in the yard, like out there, and it's like, how'd you get there? Like I love how that they addressed that, and it's just like one of those quirky things. And there's just so many like little moments where they're just like bursting in, and then like slow motion, and like Lea Seydoux' character is kind of like no nonsense too, so she's just like going in there beating it down. Like I love the execution scene where she just like zaps and like stops it like, really quickly, like she's like, and then she's like, do you want me to pull it again? And he's like, no. Don't do that. I didn't like that. But I thought like it's just so deranged in a weird way for like what.
That's a good word for it,
and it's well done. Was there anything that, if anything, was there stuff that you didn't like about this aspect of the story?
This story, I think the hardest thing for me initially was kind of getting its rhythm. So the movie starts off, and you're finding out. It took me actually a long time to understand that this was a Kansas-based newspaper company or magazine company that has reporters in France, and so that took a minute to wrap my head around. And then you go for the bicyclist, and then it starts, and I realized that they're tying this story into the one that was referenced at the very beginning of the film when they're talking to Bill Murray about the reporters and what they were working on. And And so then I had to figure out who these people were. And like you said, they had the kid from the Grand Budapest Hotel who played the younger Benicio del Toro. So I was like, what is happening? How did that guy get in here? And who was this? So it took a second for me to kind of get my bearings. That was my only kind of complaint about that particular story.
I would say like a complaint probably like towards the movie is that it was a little hard to kind of like understand what was happening in the sense of like I don't really understand like the context of like why we're going through these stories, and I felt like it was just kind of like maybe the point wasn't that you were really supposed to understand that it was just like kind of an examination of like well it was like a love letter to these journalists during this time, because I think the magazine is real, but I don't think the town that they were in, like the story, like that place in France doesn't exist. It's fake.
Ennui. What?
Yeah, that's a fake place. So I'm wondering if like this was a lot of metaphors for certain things, or like it was borrowing things from other movies or other stories. I don't know. It was hard to kind of grasp the meaning of it all, let alone what the overarching like plot was. It's really hard to, like as we said in the beginning, it is really hard to kind of explain what exactly this movie is about. And I think that's kind of I think that would be a little bit of a notch against it in a sense. I think people can go into that movie not knowing anything and probably come out being like, I don't really know what I just watched. And that's fair. And I went into that movie knowing what I was watching, or at least assumed I knew what I was watching. And I kind of came out of that and I was like, I'm a little confused kind of what the meaning of it all was. It was hard to follow. It was you know, I read that some person described it as like it's like explaining what the French Dispatch is like trying to take a clock apart and then putting it back together, but at that point you don't even know what time it is anymore. So like
that is fair. That is so fair.
So I was like, that was pretty well written. Not my words, but I was like, that's pretty apt description.
Yes, quite. Mm-hmm. Wow. No, that's like I said, I mean, I watched it. I didn't know what I was watching before. I couldn't tell you what I watched. Now, even just trying to describe some of these sequences, I couldn't tell you why something happened or what led to something. Mm-hmm. And that's why, once again, if you write story headline, I think is good in terms of it has a very sound structure. But it
was also hard to remember everybody's characters' names. This is why I'm referring to the actors. I'm like, who is who here? And it's just like, and Wes Anderson can get away with this is because he can draw star power to his movies. Like, if this was just if you put this movie and it was a cast of like basically unknowns, I don't think it would have worked as well. I think you would have been very lost as to who is who, which character is doing what here, and yeah.
No, that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Because half of the reason I bought into some of the storylines initially is because I knew the actor, and I said, "Oh, what is this person doing?"
Yeah, exactly. Like I'm saying, like Benicio del Toro's character. I don't even know. I remember Léa Seydoux's character's name. I think it's Simone because it's mentioned so many times in the movie. But like, I don't know what Adrien Brody's character's name is. Like,
nope.
I kind of remember Timothée Chalamet's character, and I kind of remember the reporters' names, but not really.
Good on you, bud, because that is all no longer in my head.
It's some French name, so, and I know Timothée Chalamet is French, but like I don't know his character's actual French name. Like I can see it in my head. I don't know how to pronounce it.
Okay, that works. Mm-hmm. I think it starts with an S, but I'm not positive.
I think it's an M actually, or at least his last name.
Okay, that could work. S first name, M last name.
But yeah.
Any other thoughts around that particular storyline?
No, I mean, I just want to say like that it's a fast-paced movie, and it's kind of like this story, or this, like all the stories are pretty fast-paced, and this one's kind of just like deranged and really fun to watch. I don't know. It's just it also touches a lot of like on darker themes, but told in a very light-hearted way. In a way, it's kind of twisted, which is why I think Demented is kind of like a perfect description for
good adjective.
For the painting one. And a lot of really cool moments, a lot of quirky moments, very Wes Anderson. But I guess we can move on to the second story.
Yes, Revision to a Manifesto. Before you just made me, I think the best way to describe this movie is kind of like that friend that you had that you always have to tell other people about before you actually bring that person in their space, because you kind of got to say, look, they're a little out there, they're a little outside the box and eccentric, but they're cool. And it might take a second for everybody to kind of buy into that, but once they do, they're like, okay, I get it. That's just how that person is. That's what this movie is.
That's actually a very good metaphor for this movie.
Thank you.
Because yeah, it is. It's very hard to explain. It's just like you kind of have to like listen. This movie, this is kind of what it is. It's a little deranged. It's a little out there. It's a little wild, but it's a lot of fun. Okay.
Yep.
And you're gonna have a good time.
Absolutely.
And it's like Wes Anderson being the most Wes Anderson, I think, in a way.
He said, "How can I up that?
Yeah.
Let's do it." And here
Seriously,
we are today.
I think he really did. Like, I think he just had full reign on this one.
No.
I don't think. Yeah, like nobody told him what he could and couldn't do in this movie.
Gave him a blank check and said, "Good luck."
All right, so revisions to a manifesto.
Yes.
All right, I'm not gonna lie. I was very confused in the very first couple of minutes of this story.
I'm glad you said that, because so was I. Because once again, the way this story starts out, if I remember correctly, is that Timothée Chalamet is playing a professor in chess. And what is stated is that the boys are essentially trying to get the rights to go into the girls'
dorm.
Dorm.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's playing on their behalf. But I don't understand why the professor was playing on the girls' behalf. And ultimately, this all kind of devolves to Timothée Chalamet is a youth in revolt. There's this whole kind of young versus old, anti-establishment versus anti-establishment after one of their friends is sent off to war too, which is worked in there. Yeah. And ultimately, it kind of culminates in... I think
it was a metaphor on, like, young kids kind of, like, being... very like I don't know. Do you think it was kind of like a metaphor for like today's youth kind of being a little bit more revolutionary against the current establishment? Because I kind of was getting that vibe, but I also know that there's a lot of like, you know, cultural revolutions throughout history, so it could have been like an absolute reference to something else entirely. But that was the vibe I was getting, and like, yeah, the beginning of the story though was very confusing. Sorry, continue.
No, I know it's okay. I agree with that kind of assessment that it is a metaphor for kind of that youth in revolt. And I also think it's a metaphor for it's important for kids to remember to be kids. I think there is a moment towards the end where Frances McDormand is talking to Timothée Chalamet, and I guess is kind of sort of antagonist / love interest, and she's saying you all should, you know, make up, make love, and just be people, be kids. Mm-hmm. And it's just a reminder that while they're fighting this grandiose battle with whatever consequences it may have, it's also you're still growing up, you're still figuring out who you are, so that's essential too. So I agree with what you're saying there.
But yeah, I was a little confused. I was like, wait, they're just rebelling to get into the girls' dorm, but like upon reflection, I think it's more of like because there were so many different scenes where it kind of like escalates into like a violent confrontation in a sense, and I wasn't sure if that was actually just because the students themselves were taking it really far, as like we really want this to happen or something like that, and then they were calling in like the military police to like rebel against, like to stop it. It just seemed kind of insane, but I think the elevation is to highlight a lot of different things. Maybe that was both going on today and, you know, in the past, or I'm not really sure if it's related to something, but I felt like even if it is related to something else, there is a lot of to say, like kind of what's going on in these years. I felt like it was very appropriate, like for
good word.
I can't even. Words are hard right now. So for like modern day story, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
It was a lot of lessons there. But going through it, I was also really confused about the very opening sequence, or kind of the opening sequence, past the Timothée Chalamet. Like, it was when Frances McDormand's character goes in, sits down with, I guess, Timothée Chalamet's parents, and And I was like, A, I'm confused about her relationship with her parent, or with his parents rather, and then B, like they suddenly escalated into them apparently setting her up on a double date, and I was actually kind of confused by that until the date arrived. I was like, wait, is there a double date happening? I was like, I kept asking myself, is there a double date about to go on? Like, why is it going upset? Why do they care? What's the relationship here? I felt like I missed it. Did you catch that?
I didn't even know they were going on a double date, so I guess not. Wait, is that why Christoph Waltz was in there?
No. It was so Timothy Chalamet's parents and then Frances McDormand are sitting at the dinner table, right? And then they start questioning her about like why she's not in a relationship and yada yada yada. She starts like crying because of the tear gas outside, which is like another thing of the escalation. Honestly, I'm wondering if this whole thing is about a metaphor for police brutality. Because now that I'm thinking about it, I could definitely draw the lines there. We can get into that in a second. But but then like she gets up when the date arrives, like, sorry, I didn't know you were coming. Do you not remember that guy walking in? And then she goes into the bathroom and Timothy Chalamet's just in the tub.
Okay. Yeah. That rings a bell.
Yeah.
There we go. Oh man, it was also funny during that scene because Timothy Chalamet is like, I'm self-conscious about like, my new muscles growing in, and they also make reference of muscles in Dune.
I know,
like,
the movies came out the same weekend, but like obviously there's like no, like I'm so self-conscious about my new muscles, and he says this like multiple times. Like
I know, I was like,
I also find it weird that he has like a sexual relationship with like Frances McDormand.
That was so out of nowhere. I did at first. I was like, "Are they?" And then they're in bed together. Yeah. I'm like, "I guess that's where they were going with this." That was
what the squeaking was, and then I was like, "Oh, okay." And then I'm like, "Oh," and then like he confirms it later on with that really funny line where he's talking to like his next love interest. She's like, "I'm a virgin." He's like, "I am too." Well, except for. And then she goes, "I thought so."
Yeah, see, there were some pretty witty lines in there.
It's just also like another really odd storytelling point. But what can you do?
No, it was, and I'm trying to figure. It's funny too because I was gonna ask the question. Frances McDormand always says, "I'm trying to keep journalistic integrity, so I'm not trying to get involved in the story."
Switzerland here.
Yeah, but she ends up revising the manifesto that Timothy Chalamet writes and distributes out to the students. And then she also kind of, inserts herself into other situations that have to relate to the uprising. And I'm curious, do you think that she was, A, justified, but B, also being good in that? Or do you think that she was ultimately, taking the momentum that the movement might have had and hindering it in a way?
I don't know. I think there was a lot of like commentary around like, oh, journalists can't be neutral during that moment in time as well, and like as much as they try to be, I'll take Aaron Sorkin's words here, is that you can't be biased towards being fair. And like, what does that mean? Well, if everybody walked in one day and said that the Earth is flat, you wouldn't report the next day saying like, oh, so and so said the Earth is flat and other people disagree. You would report the science proves that the Earth is not flat, right? So you can't be biased towards being fair. But so I think in that sense that like maybe it doesn't really relate perfectly here, but in that sense you could have like, I think her stepping in was just kind of putting her own stake in the game, kind of giving a more personal touch to the story. And I don't think it really hurt it because I felt like she was on their side in a way. I don't know. Do you think she was on her side? Like, what are your thoughts there? Or what do you think? Do you think she interfered in a way? In my opinion, I don't think she did. I can see other people cared, or at least Timothy Chalamet's love interest, and I don't remember her name.
I think it was like Naomi or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. And she was pretty upset by it, but like she's like, "What is this dribble?" Even though like I think Timothy Chalamet was pretty proud of it, but he's also like, she's a really good writer, and like, oh, like I don't know. I think she would have been upset by. I don't know how much Frances McDormand's character really had an influence on it. I felt like she just kind of helped him get his thoughts and make it more cohesive, concise. I don't think she like poured her own thoughts into it. So like it could have just been that she just didn't like what Timothée Chalamet had to say, and it was maybe, who knows? I don't know. It's hard to say, but like, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think she interfered? Do you think the neutrality thing should have been upheld, or do you think like what are just fire away?
Well, I did love the one when she said, "This isn't like my first manifesto" or something like that. I was like, "Oh, like where have you been?"
Yeah, which is like another thing, and like where I think that's the good point, where I think she might have been on her side, on their side, because maybe she was a revolutionary, or maybe she's reported on this kind of, in the past, and kind of like understands like what it could look like, or who knows. But continue.
True. No, you're good. And so I was thinking in a way with another movie reference. Did you ever see the movie Star Trek 1?
Like the 2009 Star Trek?
Yes. Okay, so you remember how there's a moment in which future Spock goes and he's talking to Mr. Scott, and he essentially tells him the formula for like light speed teleportation, and it was ultimately Mr. Scott's formula that he would have come up with in the end, but they basically skipped a number of steps and he was just giving it to him as the final product, so he didn't have to do the that's kind of what this sequence reminded me of. So I feel like the revolt would have gotten to where Frances McDormand kind of helped it get, but at the same time, so she expedited it, and I'm just, part of me thinks that's the right way to go, and the other part thinks that what lessons or what other things could they have picked up in that process of trying to get to the end goal that got dropped to the wayside that might have been essential for even greater things down the road. Those were my thoughts. Some things to pray about.
To pray about. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, do you think that? I mean, we already talked a little bit about how like it could possibly relate to modern day. Do you like see any of that now upon like reflection?
That's a very good question. Well, I think especially just thinking about, I was just reading an article a minute ago or so, climate change. And I know that for individuals in our age kind of demographic and those younger, we're understanding that we're basically stepping into the role of it's only going to get worse from here. This is as good as it's going to get. So we have to do everything we can to stop climate change. And unfortunately, there's that generational gap in which those who are kind of calling the shots right now are not helping us out. And they're ultimately going to pass this on to us as well. And we're not necessarily going to be... So it then becomes imperative for us to try and make those changes now and to do that while we're, still at time. And so I thought of that in thinking about this particular story because while it might be about getting into the girls' dorm, it's also, I think there was something more there about just kind of young people being involved and inspiring people. You saw that Timothée Chalamet's picture at the end was spread around, and he just kind of became the face for revolution. And so I think that's something that could be taken from this particular narrative.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, for sure. I think there's a couple of things you could probably draw connections to. I think you can say that A has, like what you just mentioned, like climate change or kind of a rebel against the establishment because these young people, like younger people, are just kind of like mad with like what they kind of have to deal with. In this case, it seems that they're just mad that they can't go to the girls' dorm, but it is like kind of like a larger message in all, and that it's it's a lot of things. They're going up against what is the current the rules of society right now. They're like, I think Timothée Chalamet's like girlfriend goes kind of a bit on a rant on being like, oh, we're being really imperialistic, we're sending people like soldiers, they should just desert and like abandon it, like stand up for something. And then like Timothée Chalamet and all the guys are like, oh, how dare you, and then their friend comes and they're like, wow, you're back. He's like, he deserted, got like 6 months in jail time or whatever it was. And I also think that there might be, I said before, that like a little police brutality. I mean, in the story, all that we know is that they're protesting because they want to go into the girls' dorm anytime, all the time, 24/7 or whatever it is. And yet there's like a huge armada of forces of like, police essentially. They like go in and they just like storm the barricades, and it's just like it's kind of like something so small like it requires ridiculous action by the police in the sense. Like they tear gas them, which I think is a great metaphor to when, Trump or not Trump rather, but like Bill Barr like tear gas protesters outside the White House.
Oh, true.
And like, it's sorry we're getting a little political here, but it's just I think it's
What you got, bud?
I think it's just like really funny that or not funny really, but like rather
there's some parallels there.
Yeah, a lot of parallels to kind of like modern day what's happening in like politics and across not just America but like the world as well.
True. No, that's a very insightful point there, and something I didn't really even pick up like on, just knowing now what the context of the whole argument was. And I mean, like you said, there was guards on guards and soldiers there, and they had this whole little, I guess, HQ that they were doing the chess, and the chess game somehow got worked into there too. So no, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm. It was definitely an interesting sequence, and I think there's probably a lot to kind of unpack there, but we don't even know what his like manifesto even says. Like, so we don't really know what it's like truly about. We only have what we can go off of, so we have to draw our own conclusions.
Yeah, sometimes there are questions without answers. Do you have any other thoughts around that particular story?
No. What about you?
Honestly, I think maybe upon watching it a second time or a third, there will be more. But right now, that's, I think, the limit of what I picked up from the first viewing.
All right. Off to the final.
The private dining room of the police commissioner.
Yes.
Now, I will admit that this was my favorite story.
I was going to say this was my favorite as well.
Okay, perfect. It's about, I guess, a culinary journalist who's going to have a meal with this renowned police chef. Mm-hmm. And essentially during that time, the police commissioner's son, who was young, is kidnapped by this group of criminals and held captive. But they're trying to figure out a way to get him back, and so hijinks ensue, as one might expect. Mm-hmm. So, oh man, but okay, yeah, Bud, talk me through what was your favorite part about this story?
Favorite part about this story. Okay, so there was so much about what I loved about the story. The entire time that Jeffrey Wright's like narrating, like drinking that cocktail that they had, like it was so. I don't know why, but the way that he was reading it, the words coming out of his mouth, it was just so beautifully written, so beautifully said. And I'm like, damn, I want this cocktail. Like, what is this drink that like is so mesmerizing that you had to describe it in one of the such a. It's like I'm all hot and bothered now. like damn. But that was really, it was like just like the entire the narration. I loved all these like sequences between like the shootout scene and like kind of going through like the dinner scene, like when the hostage takers are like eating dinner and like Stephen Park's character comes in and like feeds them the food. I loved all like that whole sequence. Like Ed Norton's great in just this very limited role. The car chase sequence where it suddenly turns into like a 2D animated movie, and it's just like this wild ride, and it was great. I mean, everything I loved. It was such a excellent part to the movie, and it really caps off like what the French Dispatch is. And like we've been talking for like almost an hour now, and like this movie's not even that long, but you can already tell like how dense this movie is. But what did you like about this movie, Palmer?
No, I liked for this particular story that you basically ran the whole gamut in terms of the emotional spectrum.
Yeah.
So obviously it was funny with some one-line quips, and then you also had that scary moment when the kid's kidnapped, and that what he means to the police commissioner, who is his father, and then the return of him, and you see them emotionally kind of embracing. And then I just love, my favorite moment was just when the chef at the end. So essentially the way they get him back is the chef goes and he poisons this meal and he cooks it for the criminals. And so they have him taste test it before to make sure that nothing's wrong with it. And he knows it's poison, but he still takes it. And they all end up dying, but he ends up surviving the chef. Mm-hmm. And so he's talking to, I think it was Jeffrey Wright's character.
It was Jeffrey Wright's character.
Okay, perfect. And he just is describing what the poison tasted like. And he said that's just a flavor he'd never experienced. It's something new. And he said, doing that kind of work for so many years, that so rarely happens. And it was so random, but it was so beautiful to me. It was
tragically beautiful when I was hearing
Yes.
It's
yes.
just like, it's like the forbidden fruit in a way. Like, he's just like, it was a taste I never had before. And like, for a chef, he's like, but like it's and the way that he was saying it, he was like genuinely loved the taste of it. And he's like, I want to recreate that, but it was like, it was poison at the end of the day.
Can't do it again.
Yeah.
Oh man, yeah. And I also love the fact that like you said, it went to animation for a good little stretch there, and then they had like the strongman, and he was. I don't know what he had it, but I loved him. And he was on the car, gets thrown off the window, and then they take the kid, run him around, get back to the car. He runs back on, jumps on the car again, and then just take off like nothing happened. So, I mean, it was wild.
I also really, really enjoyed when like the shootout scene, like the muscle guy, he's just like sitting there, there's like bullets flying, he's just watching, and like the whole like the raid on the kidnappers like base, and it's just like barreling through the walls, like they got like the alpine climbers like digging through the tunnel. Like, I just loved all of that like sequence. It's just so ridiculous, but like it's Wes Anderson, so it works.
Definitely. And I wish there's so much. There's more about the character for Jeffrey Wright, who has a photographic memory, and he's literally recounting this entire story word for word while sitting in an interview with Ray Donovan. I forget the actor's name, but
Lee Schreiber.
Yeah. It's just like, what is going on here?
Yeah. Interesting.
And like you said,
all the modern parts are in color, and
that's what I was literally about to comment on. Like you said, sometimes it goes to black and white, sometimes it goes to color.
Yeah.
And I also love that story was, I think, probably the only one that I think in terms of, so there's juxtapositions throughout the stories in which Bill Murray is going and talking to these writers.
Yeah.
And so then he talks Jeffrey Wright's character, who's like, I don't want to include the part about the poison. Yeah. And he said, no, that's why the story needs to be.
Yeah, no, he's like, it made me feel too sad. And then he's like, no, like, keep it in. That's the reason you write the story. That's the whole point. It ties it all together.
Yup.
And I'm like, it does?
Hey, some people are curious about the taste of poison.
I know, but like, I guess like wonder. It's like kind of like the tragic heart at the center of the story.
No, I see.
Because the story, I guess, is originally about the chef, right? He's going there to, like, as the title suggests, and then it kind of gets out of hand because there's kidnapping that happens while the dinner's ongoing, and then it goes on like this whole thing, and the story gravitates away from that. And I think Bill Murray's like, no, refocus that, because I think the point of that like interaction is to suggest that like we're not here to report like some crime, crazy heist crime story. Like we want to report about food. Isn't that like what the reason the magazine was created in the first place? That was like kind of like lighthearted stories, and I don't know. But then you go back, and the revisions to a manifesto is not really like a lighthearted. I guess in a way it was a lighthearted story, but it's not really that lighthearted. But I digress.
No, agreed. Yeah, it's interesting just knowing kind of all the stories that are individually put together in the film, and then particularly this story. I think almost the way that they finished it off was kind of the overall thesis of the entirety of the film.
Yeah, I agree.
Like, that's why you make the film.
Yeah, that's why you make it. Yeah, and it was Bill Murray's character though was pretty funny, and
no
crying in my office. And even when he like goes and meets like Jeffrey Wright in jail, I was like, no crying, don't cry. Just try to make it sound like you meant to write it like that or something.
Yeah, that's his line.
Yeah.
There you go. You remember more of these than you gave yourself credit for there, bud.
Well, I did see it yesterday. So.
Oh, okay. Fair.
Yeah. So.
Oh man. I also just love the fact that they put Bill Murray's body in his office, just like lying there.
I know, like on his desk, not even in a casket. And then they start writing a story while his body is literally sitting there.
Because why not, right?
Yeah, why not? And then they all like chip in, and everybody like says a line. It's great. It's a good little like kind of sign off at the end of that movie.
Oh man.
But is there anything else you want to like more to talk about? I feel like we really quickly went through Jeffrey Wright's story, and we talked about how it was like our favorite one.
I know there is actually a lot. So okay, Saoirse Ronan's appearance. What did you think about that?
I don't know. It was just a nice little callback to her appearance in, I guess,
Grand Budapest Hotel.
Yeah, and she was also in Grand Budapest. But oh yeah, you just said that. I thought you said something else. I don't know what you would have said. My God. But yeah, it was like a nice little callback. Ed Norton obviously has kind of been a regular of Wes Anderson movies, and I don't know. I just liked her appearance. I think it was just a cool little like, wave to it all. And she really connected with the kid. I wonder if the kid like felt bad that she died, but yeah. What can you say? What can you do?
Hey, he survived.
Yeah. He survived.
I was gonna say that in terms of just what I hear from reporters, a lot of times some of their bigger stories aren't necessarily what they intended to write about. Like they were following the breadcrumbs for another, and then they just got roped into this larger thing. And so I think that the Jeffrey Wright story does a really good, because once again, he's there for food, and he gets into this whole, hostage, high stakes situation.
Yeah, he's in the car in the car chase,
yeah. Just experience it. Goes by Willem Dafoe's in a kid, and also they were trying to kill Willem Dafoe.
No, I think they were trying to free William Dafoe. I thought, or did they?
I thought people were going to kill Willem Dafoe because he was going to like snitch, and then that's why the police were waiting when he walked into the room.
Oh, but I thought they said that. Like, I thought the hostages wanted to free him to release him.
Maybe I'm wrong.
I don't remember. I don't know.
Oh.
It's hard to say.
There's a lot going on in this film.
There really is. Like, just to remember, this movie is only like an hour and a half long.
Yes. And once again, I thought they'd mentioned other reporters, so I thought more stories were going to be incorporated.
Yeah, I honestly was shocked how short Owen Wilson's story was. I thought that was going to be longer. It was very, very quick.
Agreed.
He's like another regular to Wes Anderson. I thought they were bringing him back, but it was more of just like a callback for him. So, but he did bring on a couple of new people. I don't think he's had like Jeffrey Wright before.
I don't think so either. And then who else? Willem Dafoe was in Grand Budapest Hotel. What am I talking about? He's had Bill Murray in like every single one of his films, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, he's like a staple. He's in every film. He even had Edward Schwartzman. Jason Schwartzman. God.
Oh, yeah.
He was at the very end.
Yes.
Who's also another pretty big regular of Wes Anderson. Did he?
Was that Francis McDormand's first film?
Yes, it might be. Unless, yeah, I can't think of another movie of his. And Tilda Swinton's been in other movies of his, I'm pretty sure.
Yes, I think she was in Best Hotel, I'm pretty sure again. He had a lot of people in that film.
I mean, he's got a lot of people in every movie.
Also true.
So, I mean, Liev Schreiber's in this movie, very short role. Ed Norton, mentioned already. Saoirse Ronan. Benicio del Toro, Lea Seydoux, who doesn't have that many lines, but like is kind of the centerpiece of that story. Timothée Chalamet is 100%. In this, But I mean, this story was definitely my favorite. But like, I feel like there's maybe less to talk about with it because it is pretty straightforward. It's quirky.
I think that might be why.
Yeah, it's very quirky. It's got its great lines. But yeah, it's definitely my favorite one, but it is definitely the most straightforward one compared to the other two.
Yeah. So rank them in order of favorite, like 1 to 3.
That's tough. I would have to go Jeffrey Wright, story, then Tilda Swinton's, and then Frances.
Okay.
I like them all.
Same
I
order.
mean, but Jeffrey Wright's is definitely my favorite, and I would definitely think Tilda Swinton with Frances McDormand is like tied for me.
Okay.
But I'll edge the Tilda Swinton one slightly ahead because I thought that was pretty funny. That one.
Same. Did you have a favorite performance? I mean, I know there was a bunch of actors in there.
Wow,
but...
favorite performance. That is
tough.
Jeffrey Wright. Jeffrey Wright was my favorite performance.
Okay, yeah, you know.
Yeah.
Like, first time, I think, with Wes Anderson, but dude knocked it out of the park. Yeah. And it was such a specific character, too. I think that really, he brought that out.
Yeah, I would definitely think it was Jeffrey Wright who did. I mean, all the performances were really great. There was no one who, like, missed the mark there. I think everybody did a fantastic job, but I think Jeffrey Wright really stood out to me in that movie, in that role.
No, same. Okay. That was your favorite. Did you have, who was the most relatable character to you?
Most relatable character?
Yeah.
Huh. That's tough. You know, in a way, I don't know how much I related with a lot of the characters because I don't know how well I got to know them. You know, like they were all on screen for a very short amount of time. They're developed, but I don't know if I got to know them, if that makes sense. You know, like
no, that does.
They're developed in their own like, contained story, but you know, I don't know their, you know, what their character's like. So for me to relate to a specific character, I feel like it would be. It's hard. I don't know if I could. What about you?
Oh, it's Owen Wilson, hands down. Oh, man, I'm kidding. Honestly, I think maybe I probably, by virtue of age, might have gone with the Timothy Chalamet character, just because we are kind of at that where we're able to start making our voices and her, but then it's also we're still trying to grow up and determine what our own views on the world are. So I related to that one a little bit.
Yeah, I think I'm inclined to agree that, like, in a way I can relate to his character because I can kind of understand the perspective of what he and his friends are kind of going through. You know, as someone who, you know, reads the news on a daily basis, I find myself screaming internally a lot. So, and a lot of things that's going on in our political institutions.
Oh, man. Where does this film rank for you among Wes Anderson's others?
I don't know. I think Grand Budapest is still my favorite. I love Moonrise Kingdom. I mean, fantastic Mr. Fox. And then, I don't know, French Dispatch would probably be solidly somewhere in, like, the middle, like 4 or 5, around there, maybe, you know. It's a good movie. I enjoyed it. It was a fun ride. It was just, it's a lot and really kind of hard to follow and digest. It takes a lot of reflection. Like, you have to really pay close attention and then really, like, think about what you just saw to really, like, understand kind of the purpose of the movie. What about you, though?
No, I actually I literally have the same exact kind of rankings as you do. Although I will say I haven't seen as many Wes Anderson films, unfortunately. I know I have to step it up. But this one seemed different in a way. Like, it seemed like he was breaking from his traditional style, at least of the films that I've seen. And also just other films. Like, I was going to ask you the question, have you ever seen a film put together quite like this? So I put it kind of in that middle tier. But do you have a response for that question?
No, because I feel like Wes Anderson is so unique in the way that he directs his movies. Like, he's got, like, the colors, those sets where he, like, just pans, like that Wes Anderson pan where he, like, you know, basically is moving off, like, from one set to another. It's just like the really, like, kind of like flat shots, like specifically kind of the beginning of the movie where he's talking to Bill Murray's talking to Owen Wilson and, like, he's fixing his bike and, like, there's, like, 3 people in the shot and it's at a really interesting angle and it's just, like, it just kind of sits there for a while and it's, like, it just feels like that's just Wes Anderson's style and nobody else does that. No other director does this kind of thing, at least that I'm aware of, you know. But that's just me.
No, solid.
What about you? You know of any?
No, honestly, I mean, in terms of just going non-linear, I think the biggest call out would probably be Quentin Tarantino. But then you compare any other aspect of their films and they don't line up at all. So I definitely think that Wes Anderson kind of has his own, and he loves, just like you said, like the quirkiness, and he'll add in these random points about characters that will come up like once or twice that has nothing to do with anything like related to the story or what the task at hand is, and yet somehow it just works its way in there, and you just laugh because it's so outrageous. But you couldn't imagine any other way with a film of his, so that works for him.
All right. Any last thoughts on the French Dispatch before we wrap this one up?
Honestly, I was pleasantly surprised. Literally, like I said, I had no idea what this was going to be. The structure was unlike anything I've ever seen, and yet by the end of it, I felt something, and I was enjoying myself, so hats off.
All right. Well, thanks everyone so much for listening. This has been the What You Got podcast. I'm your host, Charlie Budd. Joined with me, as always, is Jordan Palmer. You can find us on social media. Palmer, why don't you give him the links real quick?
Yeah, sure. You can follow us on Instagram at What You Got Podcast, Whatcha spelled WHATCHA, and on Twitter at What You Got Cast, Whatcha spelled the same way.
And be sure to drop a follow wherever you listen to your podcasts. We are also now on YouTube. We'll be tweeting that out on our social media accounts tomorrow. You can see our last 2 episodes, which includes this one. So it's this one and the Dune episode out on YouTube. And then, what was I going to say? Oh, but if you don't follow us on social media, which you totally should, you can also just find us on YouTube by just typing in the What You Got podcast. You'll see our logo, hopefully, and us. And be sure to subscribe. And that's been our show. Our episodes are every Monday. What was I? Oh, but sorry we're late this weekend. That we didn't have one last week. It's been a very, very hectic period. Hopefully you can forgive us. So we'll see you all next week.